The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Chris Ronzio. Chris, welcome.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. Consulting Success. I love it.
I'm excited for this, man. So I guess when you and I connected, I was at an event in Arizona and you were giving a talk there, a talk that really resonated because you are the founder and CEO of a company called Train You. Before starting that, you've built and sold and been involved in other companies. But your company, in terms of Train You, is all about, it's a software that helps business owners to create systems and then train their employees on it. And then your latest book, which we'll talk about as well, is called The Business Playbook. And that kind of discusses your framework for building playbooks and systemizing businesses and all that kind of good stuff. So when I saw your talk at this event, I thought I've got to get you on the podcast just to share your story, but also your experience. Because I think for many consultants and firm owners, especially as they're thinking about scaling and growing teams, SOPs, processes, systems, having a better handle on all those things can be really valuable. So yeah, excited to have you on.
And it can also feel like a necessary evil. I know a lot of people don't love process and doing this sort of the systems. And so we'll get into it, but we'll talk a lot about when to do this as well.
It's interesting you say that because I know when we started kind of like down this process a few years back, and more recent times, we've done a lot more of this. For some people, the idea of like a process or a system actually feels like you're taking away creativity, like you're bringing more rigidity and structure. And a lot of people don't really like that, right? Like you leave the corporate world or employment because you want to do your own thing. You want flexibility, you want freedom. And then to kind of bring all this stuff back, I know for some people can feel like it's suppressing the desire or the whole goal of having freedom and flexibility. I don't know. What are your thoughts or kind of experiences with that?
I think you nailed it. When a lot of people start their businesses, they don't want any structure. They just want chaos because they're trying to figure everything out, right? Like you don't know what's going to work at the beginning. You don't know what service people are going to buy. You don't know what you could kind of productize. And so you're testing, you're experimenting, you're throwing stuff at the wall. But what process does is it unlocks scalability. So once you have something that is working, if you want to maximize your bandwidth and maximize your output and be able to do as much with as little time as possible, you need a system. You need some kind of process to be efficient, to efficiently do what you're doing, because that lets us take on more client work. It lets us do more before we have to hire that next person. And so when I work with a lot of small business owners that are just flexing up from that one person to two people to three people, every little ounce of productivity is massive, because that can mean the difference of not having to hire for another month or 2 months. It can be the difference of being able to put another 5 or 10 or 20,000 in your bank account and have that cushion before you make that next hire. And it can mean the difference between you actually having some semblance of work-life balance or just working all the time. And so I think anybody that's selling services wants to maximize their productivity. And the way that you do that is by getting serious about process once you have the demand, once you have the people coming in the door. But at the beginning, I don't advocate any process. Just figure it out. Do things differently every time. You have to create demand and attention first, and then process is what creates more bandwidth.
Yeah. All right. So with a stage now being set, hopefully we've convinced some people or just kind of reconfirmed for others the importance of all this. Let's go back into where this all started. Your interest in kind of playbooks, frameworks, systems, processes. Where did this come from? Like, what were you doing before you even started your current company?
So how far back do you want to go? I guess as a kid, I always had businesses. Like I had the landscaping businesses and I sold wrapping paper and I sold candy and I did car detailing and waxing and I cleaned people's lawn furniture. And so I was always doing businesses. And so very familiar with selling services, pricing services, hiring my friends as labor and trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to do a car wash, how do I not just wash one car? How do I do a car wash that my neighbors give me their keys and I drive 10 people through my driveway in the afternoon? I was always thinking about how to maximize productivity or maximize time. And so when I started my first actual company, I was in high school, I was 14, and it was a video production company. What we did wasn't necessarily the creative side of video. It was live event coverage. And so we did talent shows, we did sporting events, we did graduations, commencements, we did anything that you could set cameras up and film live, record and sell the footage to coaches and scouts and parents, live stream the footage, show it for instant replay for judges. That was our sweet spot. And so in building that business through high school and through college, we expanded to where we were doing events all across the United States. And in order to staff those events, I would have to find camera crews in every metropolitan area so that they could drive within a few hour drive to wherever the event I would book was. So we had to get really good at training people on our process so that they could show up and look and feel and act like they had worked with us for 10 years. They'd be wearing the shirts, they'd have the lanyards on, they'd have the hats on, they'd be using the same app on the iPad to take orders, they'd be using the same order forms and postcards, they'd have the same tablecloths, they'd have the same cables and cameras, the video would be viewed the same through the website. And all of that consistency came down to just a obsession with process. So that was really where I honed the skill, I would say, was running my video production company, trying to fine tune a process that looked and felt the same across every state in the US.
So, okay, two questions I'm just like burning to ask you. The first is, where do you think your hunger for sales and doing business at such a young age came from? Is that from a family member, or like where that inspiration and motivation and hunger originate from?
As a kid, I think it just came from wanting to buy my own stuff. Like my parents
want to buy,
like Sega.
Yeah, you're dating yourself a little bit, man. I remember Sega back in the day. Wow. Okay.
Totally. I remember one walk around the neighborhood with my dad, and I really wanted Air Jordans. I'm sure a lot of kids did. And I was like, Dad, everybody has Air Jordans. And he's like, really? Does everybody have these? Because if more than half of your class has these, like, I don't want you to be behind the curve. I'll get them for you. But I was like, well, no, like 2 of my friends have them. He's like, all right, well, I'm not buying these for you. It's ridiculous. Like, if you can figure out a way to pay for them yourself, then go for it. And so I think as a kid, that was my motivation, was like, I want those sneakers, or I want this CD, or I want whatever. And my birthday or Christmas or whatever is like 7 months away. I got to figure this out.
Right, right. Yeah. And then the next question that as you were speaking before, you started your kind of first quote unquote real business at a pretty young age. I think you said, was it about 14 years old? So I know from hearing your story a little bit more detail, this business, it was pretty sizable. Like, it grew to be a fairly sizable business. You're covering a lot of events and get into some pretty well-known events that people would definitely know if you mentioned them. You're a young guy. What were you actually doing to land those deals? Because I'm sure there's a lesson inside of that for the person that's thinking to themselves, like, yeah, I'm not a salesperson, I'm not a marketing person, but they're in their 30s or in their 40s or in their 50s, and they actually have a lot more experience and probably a lot more expertise than maybe you even had at 14 or 15, but you were able to land those deals and get in on, like, win those clients. So what were you bringing to the table? How did you actually set up those deals? Like, how did you land those deals at such a young age?
I think I didn't have insecurities around being able to sell if I knew the quality was there. When I go back to the first deals I got, I remember my mom picking me up. I was probably 15. I couldn't drive. She picked me up from school. I got out of like gym class and changed into like one of those big baggy suits. It was probably like my dad's suit. And she drove me into Boston, where we grew up, to a meeting. And so I'm going up like the escalators and then up the tower to this big boardroom. And I walk in to this organization. And the receptionist didn't believe that I was there for the meeting. She was like, no, really? Like, is this a joke? And so, but I finally got in there, and I had with me like little demo video, the DVD at the time, that I was able to pop in and share with the prospect there. And because the quality was good, my young age was impressive. I think if you focus on getting good testimonials, on producing good quality, on measuring yourself up against competitors, you can stand behind quality. And then you don't have to be so afraid to go out there and sell yourself. And so I saw youth as actually a benefit. It was kind of a way to get my foot in the door. and say, I'm doing this kind of work, and it doesn't matter that I'm 15 or 16 or 17 or whatever it is. Here's the quality that you can expect. Now, at the same time, I also priced pretty low. Like when I was just getting started, I had the confidence to go sell, but I didn't have the confidence to price high enough. And I think that just comes down to experience of doing one job for this price, taking a next client at this price, your next client at this price. And so what I would encourage everyone listening to do is if you've been selling at the same price for a long time and you have demand, people are calling you, people are referring you, mark up your next job 10%. Just try it. I bet no one says no. And then once you do that a couple times, you mark that one up 10%. I think people can wait too long to adjust their prices, but that's really where you lack the confidence, is the confidence to charge enough, not the confidence to show up and do the work.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great advice. I can attest to that firsthand, working with so many consultants over the years and just seeing that it's the confidence. Like as long as you can deliver value, then you can almost always increase your fees and buyers will be happy to pay the higher fees because as long as like the ROI is still going to be there for them. And the other point around being younger or being older, I think for many humans, right? Like we have this thing where like the grass is always greener. We can be young and think in some cases like, oh, I can't do this because I'm too young. But you could also be old and go like, well, I'm older and I have all these younger people that I have to compete with. So, or I could be living in a small town and I'm competing with people in a big city, or I'm in a big city and there's so much competition. So there's always a reason or an excuse or something you can find that could hold you back. But as you've proved, right, and so many others have over the years, that if you have the mindset and the desire to make things happen, then you just go out there and figure out how to get it done.
I was able to leverage my age to get my foot in the door for certain opportunities too. Like I remember one of the biggest contracts that we had was we did all of the videos for US figure skating up until the Olympics around the country, international events, anything that would happen, big stadiums with film crews, and did some events, NBC, where we would shoot the beginning, they would shoot the end, and I would get to direct in the truck. It's really cool stuff to do as like a kid growing up. And getting that first event with them was me reaching out through their website and saying, hey, I do a lot of these events locally in my backyard. And I haven't done figure skating, but I've done these couple other sports. And I think there's application here. What would it take for me to just volunteer my services to start to learn about the figure skating stuff? Like, I just wanted to do it for free. And they wrote me back and they said, well, we don't have a way for you to volunteer, but we have this RFP going out. Like, you're welcome to throw your hat in the race. And so I filled out the RFP. I put together this whole presentation and we ended up getting one of the events on their schedule. And so that was a way to test the waters and test ourselves. And so we did that event. It went really well. And the next year they invited us to do 4 events. And the next year it was 11 events. And then by 3 years later, we had the whole United States. And it was because I was putting my foot in the door with my youth. And I think that's something that anyone can do. I'm just getting started. I just want to do this, whether for free, for cheap, and let me prove myself.
All right. So let's come back to processes and playbooks and frameworks. In your book, you kind of lay out the approach and thought process that people can take to actually start building these out. Walk us through maybe what is the best practice for people to start thinking about how they can develop a playbook and how they can kind of create more systems in their business. And then are there some areas that you see a lot of people making mistakes in that they need to make sure to avoid?
So I'll tackle this in a couple parts. The first framework is, what should you document? When should you document? And I mentioned earlier at the beginning of a business, a lot of what you're doing is experimental. And so I've got this phrase I use a lot: do it, document it, delegate it. And what that is, a reminder that at the beginning, you're just doing the work and you're figuring it out. And so you do it once, you do it twice, you do it 3 times, but until you do it consistently, until you take on that client and start to finish, you're operating in exactly the same way with the same output. You're still figuring it out. You're still doing it. And the mistake a lot of people make is if they hear a seminar or go to a conference and they think, oh, I need standard operating procedures, you start to document prematurely. And if you're documenting things that are not consistent, then they're going to be collecting dust in a few months and you're going to think you wasted all your time. And so really, you just want to do that thing over and over again until it starts to feel like a job almost. And you say, this is second nature. I'm doing this the same all the time. That's when you want to document it. And so documenting it is just writing or recording the steps and saying, here is why we do it. Here's how we do it. Here's how long it takes. I've got a whole process. This is the perfect standard operating procedure if you want to get into that. But it's just recording it or documenting it so that you can give it to someone else. And that's the last step, is delegate it. So I tell people, until you're ready to take something off your plate, until you're ready to actually delegate it, don't put yourself through this process of having to document and clarify and record it. You only really do that because you have a reason to. When you're doing something over and you want to get it to someone else, you want to take it off your plate, you want to hire that next person, you want to bring on a virtual assistant, that's when you document. And so that's important for everyone to remember, because we can sometimes hear the message that systems and processes and SOPs are important, and I feel guilty because I'm not working on them. But if you're honest with yourself and you're still at the beginning of your business journey and you're still figuring it out and you're still doing it differently every time, don't document yet. But if you're in that place where you're like, I'm ready to grow, I've got something that's proven, this is working, I've got demand, now it's time to document and write things down because you can hand them to someone else.
That's such great advice. I think a lot of people will benefit from, and just wondering, like, am I at the right place right now to go down this path, or should I hold off? I think you're going to save a lot of people a whole bunch of time, regardless of which path they take. Walk me through a little bit more. Like, so for someone who right now is working on, like, they know they want to grow the business. They might be a solo consultant. They might have a small team. There's so many aspects of running a business, from how you interact with clients to marketing to sales to fulfillment to finance and HR and technology, like all these different buckets that we could think about. Should people be focused on documenting everything and developing systems for all these things? Or do you typically recommend that there's maybe an order that they should be thinking through, like where to start and kind of how to progress through all the different aspects of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say playbook, when I talk about a business playbook, I think of it in 4 pieces. So the first piece is your profile of your company. And that is your culture. That is your mission and your vision and your core values. It's your history. It's why you exist. It's your menu of products and services and pricing. It's the market you're in. It's the ideal customer you're going after. That profile of your company is what makes you different from another company in your space. And every single person that you bring into your business, you have to teach them those things to orient them to your business. And so when we build an orientation, that's kind of one of the simplest building blocks, the simplest things to document about our business, because every single person in the business needs to understand these shared things. They need to know the background and the history and the story and why we're showing up here and what we're working on. And so that profile of your company is the first piece. And I say start there. Your next piece is your people. And so your people section of your playbook is your roles, your responsibilities, your directory of team members with their contact info. It's the basics of who's who around here, who does what, who reports to who, what are the teams and departments if you're a bigger business. And all of that people knowledge is what helps us from not stepping on each other's toes. It's who do I go to for what? That's really important early on in a business. And so even if you're listening and you're just a team of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, you're starting to develop that division of responsibilities. And long before you document any processes or SOPs, you want to know who does what around here. And that's a form of documentation in your business. So you've got your profile, you've got your people. Next would be your policies. So legally, a lot of us have to share certain things in some form of a handbook based on the jurisdiction we're in. And so we have to have some form of policies when we're getting started to make sure that we're playing by the rules, right? But then every business also has its own kind of unwritten rules of what's okay to do here and what's not okay. You may have policies for whether your employees can date, or policies about how they represent you on social media, or policies about a dress code, or there's a lot of those unwritten rules. If you can document those early, you can save yourself a lot of performance management and heartbreak and communication, fixing those things later. And so the profile, the people, the policies, those are the easy things. And that's where I suggest everyone start. And you're going to change this over time. But if you can really lock in on those 3, that is the foundation for your playbook. Because in the absence of specific processes of how we do things, You can solve a lot by knowing directionally why we act the way we act and who's in charge of what and how we behave in the company. And so I say start there. Process is a whole other thing. And so we can get into what processes to document first.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting that you recommend people start with that. In my experience, it almost sounds, I think I've probably seen more people default right away to processes and documenting how they do things and completely neglect documenting the people stuff or the profile or how roles and responsibilities are set up. Why would you say that's just so key to do before you even get to processes? Or what have you seen in terms of maybe companies that neglect that and go right into processes first, just to really drive that point home?
A lot of times when you go straight into process, it's more akin to outsourcing. You've got a specific thing that you need to get done, and you're just handing it over to someone and saying, check all these boxes, do this work. And you just kind of need someone with a heartbeat or any semblance of knowledge about your space. When you're actually hiring an employee, when you're bringing someone in full time into your business, those other three things are crucial. And if you can't get those right, then you're going to have a lot of turnover. You're going to have a lot of replacing people because they didn't work out. You'll have performance management issues. You'll have misaligned expectations. You'll have misaligned career paths. And all of that stuff creates such a burden for business owners and for entrepreneurs as they're actually trying to scale a business, that just starting with those simple foundations, that's how you be a successful employer. And I think that's the difference. If you're just trying to outsource a task, then just skip the process. But if you're really building a company, those first three things are crucial.
And then you mentioned on the process side that you do have some thoughts around how people should approach that. I don't want to leave people hanging. So what best practices do you have, or what would you say, like in terms of thinking about actually documenting the processes or bringing those processes to life? Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So look across your business. First, is there something that is done the most? Is there a task, a type of project, something that you do over and over and over again? In my business, in the video production business, this was shipping out VHS and DVDs across the world. And so we would do this thousands of times per month, that we'd take orders from our e-commerce store and we'd ship them out. And so there was a very specific process to assembling and fulfilling that order that if it was done incorrectly, it would have caused so much chaos of refunds and customer tickets and complaints. So in my business, that was a crucial thing to document early. So think across your business, just what is done the most number of times. The next one is there's something that's done by the most number of people. It's a shared process that a bunch of different people do. So example of this might be in a retail store, processing orders on a cash register or gift cards or returns or one of those things. That's something that a lot of people do. So you all want to do it consistently. And this is one of those things that it opens you up to bad reviews and bad referrals if you've got inconsistencies between different people doing the same thing. So that's another area I would look. And then the third thing would be back to delegation. What hats are you taking off? We all wear a lot of hats. What hats are you taking off? What roles are you passing to other people? Those things have a specific reason, which is delegation or wanting to scale, to grow, that you need to document. And so I would go there next. What is the next position you're hiring for? What's the next thing that's coming off your plate?
I want to dig a little bit into your company, Train. You could have gone many different paths with this business. You could have essentially just been pure play professional services, go into different organizations and help them to develop these systems and so forth. You could have licensing models with different people that you certify to become quote unquote like trainual certified consultants. Like you could have chosen a lot of different models, but you clearly chose to productize and to actually build this into a SaaS, right? Software as a service type of business. Kind of walk us through your thinking or maybe the chapters, the progression of how you got to where you are today with the model.
Yeah. So part of my story we haven't covered yet is after 13 years, I sold my video company. And when I was looking for what to do next, I started consulting. And so I started off as a solo consultant. Then I hired my first, then second, then third, then fourth employee. And I built this little consulting boutique. What we specialized in was operations consulting, helping people use tech to be more efficient, to streamline their processes. And part of what I was delivering pretty often was a playbook, except we were doing it by packaging together Dropbox folders and Google Docs and YouTube videos. And I thought, if there was something proprietary that I had. And so that's where the idea for Trainual came from. It was at first a tool for my consulting clients. And then when we decided to pivot into SaaS, the thinking was rather than selling my time as a consultant, if I can give all my time away as marketing and share how to do this, then we can monetize it with this product. And that was the idea for the pivot. And so we made that shift in 2018. The team's, of course, grown a lot since then. So we're just over 100 people now in the business. We've got thousands and thousands of companies across the world using the product. But the decision has always been to focus on SaaS, to not do a lot of services internally, because we want to be a platform that other consultants, like I used to be, can use to grow their businesses. And so any consultants out there that are helping people build their operations that can be affiliated with us, can be a referral partner, can get some type of certification, but that's a third-party thing. It's on them. And it's been really cool to see people build big businesses setting up our customers.
When you're running your boutique consulting business, before the software is already in play, a lot of people, I think, have expertise and they've explored, or at least kind of given thought to, like, what if I could build this into a software or productize this further? But in the case of software specifically, it requires an investment. I don't know, like, do you remember how much the initial investment was to kind of get version 1 of Trainual up and running?
$10,000.
Okay. How did you feel about that amount of money when you were kind of considering making that initial investment? Was it a lot for you at that time, or it was?
Yeah, it was major. I mean, like, I didn't know too much about software, but I knew that I had heard horror stories of people spending $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 developing software that just never took off. And so in my mind, the initial version of the app was a proof of concept that I was going to use for free with my consulting clients, because I was still monetizing the business on consulting. I just had this initial idea with the Trainual application was to have some IP for my consulting business. It wasn't to build a SaaS company. And so I went out and said, $10,000. I got a couple contractors. I designed it. So I guess I cut some corners there. Just went to a free mock-up tool, got like a theme kit. These things are easy to do. There's pre-built SaaS application themes. And you just have to say, all right, I want a form on this page and I want a profile on this page. And so I sketched it all out. The developers made it happen and we had a prototype.
And so once you had that, it was just a matter of you started implementing it or kind of integrating into your day-to-day work with consulting clients. What point did you decide, okay, I'm now going to actually shift and turn the focus of the business into actually selling software, not into just selling services?
So it was in late 2017. I had a team of 5, like I mentioned, and we had a big customer that finished up their project with us. And we had a gap. And so rather than looking to get a new customer, I suggested to the team, why don't we treat Trainual as one of our customers? Let's just work on it for a month or two and see how far we can get it based on all the feedback we've gotten over the last couple of years. And so from spending that $10,000, the next couple of years, I didn't invest $1 into it. It was just, let's use this in the field. And then all at once, we took that batch feedback and started working on the app. And really, then I fell in love with it. I was like, wow, this could be something. This doesn't exist out there. I was getting so many ideas. So I got a logo design, 99 designs or something. And I printed t-shirts and I came into the office with the t-shirts. I said, guess what? We're going to just do a software company. Like, here's a free shirt.
So you said you were getting a lot of feedback from the marketplace and existing clients and so forth. Were you monetizing? Like, were you actually charging anyone for the software by itself at that time?
They would get it for free for 6 months after we worked together. And then it was like $49 a month. And so over those couple years, it had grown to $1,800 or so in recurring revenue. I was ecstatic. It was like covering my car payment and my rent and all that. And my wife actually was like, maybe you should do something with this thing. But it was minimal when you're talking about a SaaS business.
Totally. So you have $1,800 a month coming in through this little SaaS kind of mock-up that was working for you, but certainly not a highly profitable software business. What were the next steps to actually start bringing in new clients and building a pipeline of business around the product and not just the services?
So I had just started in that last 6 to 12 months of my consulting business. Before we made this shift, I'd started to do a lot of content marketing. So I was writing a newsletter that was going out every week, and it started off with just my friends, and then it was a few thousand people. I printed, self-published a little book that was just like some of my hacks for running a business more efficiently. And I started prospecting on LinkedIn and sending people copies of the book. And so I was getting this like inflow of leads for the consulting service, and I saw how powerful marketing could be to drive business beyond referrals. And so it was an important lesson that I learned toward the end of consulting that I was able to carry forward into Trainual. So when we launched the product of Trainual, there was the initial big announcement of, we did a big launch party. We invited reporters from the local paper. We launched on Product Hunt, which is a website that features a lot of tech platforms. And then we started blasting everyone I knew on LinkedIn, of course, as you naturally do, just to tell everyone that this is what I'm doing now. I would love your feedback or any connections. I was not trying to sell it. I was trying to get feedback and trying to get connections and people to say, oh, let me introduce you to this other person. And I think that created some momentum. So it was 3.5 or 4 months into the business that we started doing digital ads. And that became a huge part of our early growth strategy, was being able to say, here's my pitch. If I'm sitting in a coffee shop with someone, now let me blast that out to 100,000 people and get some cold lead. That was a turning point.
Just to kind of confirm for everyone here, are you talking like ads on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google? What specifically were you doing in the early days to put this in front of more people?
Facebook and Instagram were the two that we did in the early days. And it was in your feed, but also the story ads. And so what we were trying to do is not look like a billboard, an advertisement, but look like people and appear in someone's ad and say, I've built a business to this size. And if you're going through that journey now, I wish I had this thing. Like, click here, check it out and see what you think. It was very disarming and very conversational, but it was those two channels that were early on where we scaled a lot.
Got it. Okay. And then where did that take you to? Like, once you've started running some ads, you've blasted this to everyone that you know, right? With saying that you want to get some feedback. You went from 1,800 a month in revenue to where did that roughly get you to once you started kind of doing some of these things?
So it took us about 6 months to get to 10,000 a month in recurring revenue. That was the slow going. We hit $1 million in revenue in our 13th month. And so that first year was, the first half was really just trying to figure it out. And then once we struck a vein with some of our messaging and some of the ads were working, then it was just a matter of turning those up, making sure that the customers are getting into trials and that their cards are getting charged. And we started to dial in our processes, which were, how do we do demos at scale? I was doing those differently every time for the first 6 months. But now how do we do that repeatably? All the process stuff we were just talking about.
I'm interested to know the market and space that you're in. There are other tools that exist around processes and systems and documentation. How do you look at competition? How do you look at kind of the competitive landscape? And how does that drive the decisions that you make? And also just your overall kind of like execution and marketing?
Well, the first thing is it's a huge market. And so I think it's important to know that there's always going to be a lot of tools. Just like in the consulting space, there are 1 million consultants, right? And so the way that you differentiate yourself is through your brand and your personality or your niche that you're focused on. And so for us, one of the focuses from the beginning has always been small business. When you think about process and policies and documentation, you can quickly go to compliance and learning management and training management. You start to think of these big corporate training rooms and L&D department giving you stuff that you really don't want to do. And that feels bureaucratic and it feels like a lot of red tape. And so from the get-go, we did not want to be that. We wanted to be, you've got operations in your company. And if you want to be efficient, you want to run lean and you need to write those things down or record them, we're the business for you. And so branding, positioning, pricing, that was all to make sure that our customer, the small business customer, knows that we're here for them. And so that's one piece. And then next, I think we're a hybrid sort of tool. So most of our customers, if they're writing anything down, which chances are they've just got a lot of stuff up in their head, they're training people through osmosis, they're sitting one-on-one with people. If they're writing anything down, they're most likely using tools like Google Docs or Notion or really just word processor type tools to get things written down. And where we are different from those tools is it's more a training experience. It's more as a new person getting to know a company, I can know what I haven't completed yet. I can track my own progress. I can see when something was last updated. I can see what attaches to my own responsibilities in the company that I need to be proficient in order to get that next promotion. And so it's this whole layer of a training experience that sits on top of simply writing things down that I think makes Trainual different.
You mentioned you're 100 plus team members today. Chris, how has your day-to-day changed over the last year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, what are you doing differently today compared to what you used to do before?
Well, early on, before we had leaders in place in all the different functions, I was doing the sales demos, or I was doing escalated customer success tickets, or I was setting up our CRM or whatever it was. And then little by little, as we put functional leaders in place, as we had someone to oversee customer success and we had someone to oversee the product and development and design, little by little, those responsibilities get peeled off. And so today we have departments for all the areas of the company, and I have 7 direct reports, and I see those as my 7 consulting clients. They each run their own department, which is kind of like running their own business. And my job has shifted less from doing the work and managing ICs myself to now overseeing these CEOs of their own department. And it's very comfortable because this is what I did before Trainual. So I love being an advisor, a consultant, a coach, a mentor, that sort of thing, and helping them solve the problems without solving them for them. I'm loving this stage of business.
And do you ever find yourself getting pulled into or wanting to kind of jump in with people that are kind of lower down on the ladder? What I mean by that is, so you have your 7 direct reports. Then let's take under the marketing department, you have one, let's say a CMO or someone in that kind of similar role. They have the marketing people that work within that department. Do you ever find yourself wanting to like jump down to work with the people actually in the department or give feedback, or like how involved are you with the other people inside of the department and not just the 7 direct reports?
It varies, I would say, but I could think of probably a dozen examples in the last week, working with someone that manages all of our partnerships because we're collaborating. We have a good idea about an event that's coming up. Working with someone on our people team that does all our events, about like an event that's at the end of the year that I'm just excited about. Our product teams, our squads, I'm always working with the PMs and designers and giving them direct feedback. And so I think I have to manage all these teams directly, but it's fun to continue to collaborate with all of them. I don't think you should ever stop collaborating with people at all different levels of the business. You always want to be approachable. You always want to be involved because it's fun. That's what I like to do.
All right. So before we wrap up, I want to find out from you, what is top of mind for you right now? When you look at, you've grown to 100 people plus, what does the future look like? What challenge is top of mind for you? What are you thinking about right now, Chris?
Well, top of mind for me, a couple things. So number one, we have a big event coming up. Our annual event called Playbook is coming up in September. I don't know when this will air, but September 22nd and 23rd, you can go to playbook2022.com. Free event. We're expecting 10,000 or so people digitally zooming in for a couple of days. So that will be a lot of fun. And I'm working on my presentation and my keynote for that because that's when we roll out a lot of fun product stuff. And so it's an exciting date that we look forward to every year. Next is a new presentation for a speaking event that I'm working on. So I do a lot of now thought leadership kind of content, speaking and writing, and my podcast 5 days a week. So that's always top of mind. And then we're hiring a new leader to add to our team. And so that's been top of mind. Dozens of interviews and really understanding how to find the right person. Who is the right person we need? Talking to our investors and my mentors and really refining that role. So those will be 3 things.
All right. We're going to make sure to include both the event. I think this will probably come out after the event, but regardless, maybe for next. Chris, I want to thank you for coming on here today. I also want to make sure that we could maybe link up in the show notes more information about Trainual, maybe there's something cool that we could provide for all of our listeners and guide them towards you. So maybe we'll put something up at consultingsuccess.com/SOP just to make it simple. So consultingsuccess.com/SOP. Maybe Chris and I come up with something to either guide you guys towards or just something that would be of value. So head over there and you can learn more about Trainual and everything else that they have going on there. And maybe some cool resource we'll be able to throw at you. So Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today, sharing some of your journey, best practices. I should also mention that right now we are using your product and we're rolling it out across our team. And so again, highly recommend for anybody that is interested in bringing in better systems and processes and documenting things to make training easier and have things more organized, head over to consultingsuccess.com/SOP. You'll see why. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.